to bring on interesting people from diverse backgrounds to talk about programming languages, programming tools, computer science in general, and everything in between. And today, I'm extremely excited. I'm really excited to talk with Henrik Lissner, who's creator of a configuration framework for Emacs called Emacs Doom. Hello, Henrik.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Nice to have you. So I think the first question I wanted to ask to break the ice would be, what's your favorite game?
Oh, starting with the hard questions.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a game I'm fond of. You play a Marine killing hordes of demons. It's very obscure. Maybe you've heard of it.
I haven't.
Doom. It's funny. I still play classic Doom with my friends with mods. Surprising how active the modding community is, despite its age.
I've seen that there is some people trying to run Doom on like a thermometer or something of that sort, or it was like this tool to yeah. So I was just joking, but I remember playing Doom in high school, and it was like we were trying to stitch together like computers to try do it over LAN, and it was kind of like
no, that's a blast. Yeah, Doom was my first exposure to programming. The source code came out in the 90s, and I got it on a diskette from my uncle, and I was looking over it. I didn't understand a single bit of it, but it inspired my fascination with programming.
So when you say introduction to programming, it was you were like analyzing the code of Doom somehow?
Yeah. I was just sitting on this old IBM in my dad's office, and I had this Doom on the diskette, loaded it up, and just looking through the C code made no sense to me, but I just kept looking at it for months and months, and it took years for me to eventually understand it, but at the time I just found it so arcane, so bizarre.
Interesting.
But I loved it. It was great.
I think many people start, maybe not many, but it's pretty common to start with games. I think it's a good introduction to programming. So if I'm not mistaken, Doom was it was written in C, right?
Yeah.
Have you continued with, like following the John Carmack's steps, like with the later games?
A little bit, yes. Tidbits here and there. There's a snippet where he did a square inverse function, and over it he has a little funny comment that says, "I don't know what this does," or something like that. I forget. But after the Doom source code, that I didn't actually look too deeply into any of his future games, because the Doom source code came to me from my uncle through a diskette. It came to me. I didn't have to seek it out. And I didn't have access to the internet much in my early childhood because I moved around a lot. And in countries where dial-up was the standard for a long time, even when cable became normal. So internet was a bit of a strange thing for me.
Yeah.
I was a bit late to that game.
It's somehow similar for me. I was like, remember like connecting and measuring how much data I fetch just to not to pay too much.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
And this sort of things. Interesting. So I was wondering, because I started with editors, like my first introduction was Vim, I mean VI, and it was almost 2 decades ago. I remember like I was so excited about this editor, and from what I understood, I was trying to like prepare for this interview. Vim and VI for you was also maybe the first or one of the first editors, and I was wondering what's the path from Vim? How did you start with Vim, and then how did you migrate to Emacs, and how did you discover Emacs?
Well, Vim wasn't really my first editor, but I did spend the most time there, about 14 years. And before that, I was just buzzing through all the other editors. I can only really remember Notepad++, but I would go through that. And Eclipse. Oh, that was a
Yeah.
trip. But going from Vim, well, at the tail end of my Vim journey, I was really tired of VimScript. I wouldn't wish VimScript on my worst enemy. I wanted to find an editor that was a better Vim, just no VimScript.
Absolutely.
I think this was. I think I started in Emacs in 2014. This was before VS Code. I had no idea Spacemacs existed, and I wouldn't for another 2 years. I was looking for a better Vim, and I tried IntelliJ. I remember IntelliJ as being the closest before I got to Emacs, but none of their Vim plugins across, I think it was Atom and Sublime Text, none of them cut it. They were missing certain features, certain motions, or the X command line. Just it bothered me in small ways. But
and for example,
sorry,
what did you like about IntelliJ, and what was the small things you didn't like?
Well, the integration with all the tools in IntelliJ. I mean, you can't really beat that. In Emacs, you can get close, and with some legwork, you can get really close. But that's a lot of work. In IntelliJ, it has it all laid out for you. You press a button, and it does all kinds of test suites and benchmarks for you. You don't have to do anything yourself, which kind of bothered me a bit. I like knowing how to use my tools by hand, straight on the command line. But when I found Emacs, I discovered evil mode, and I didn't find Maggot, Org, or Tramp, the keystones of Emacs, the keystone features of Emacs, until much, much later. No, Evil was the most convincing Vim emulator of them all. Not to suggest Evil is flawless, but it was the least incomplete. And Elisp was the cherry on top. If something was missing, I could drop a couple lines of advice into my init file.
Yeah.
Done. Yeah, that's all I needed to do.
You had everything you needed.
Exactly. Or at least everything I needed to do it, to add what I needed myself. So I just committed to the switch and kept on trucking in my little bubble, my yak shaving bubble.
Which became, I would say, like extremely popular, because when I discovered Doom for the first time, I was blown away. And I'm not saying it just to, I mean, to be nice, but there is like this strange, well, strange, it's not a good word, but very nice combination of easiness. It's very easy to start with Doom if you want to start with Emacs. And at the same time, there is this like designer aspect. And when I was looking information about you, I stumbled upon your LinkedIn profile. And you mentioned that you are UX designer, and I was wondering if there's like what's the connection, and
one of the first things that struck me, besides the performance and the lack of Vim keybinds when I picked up Emacs, was its look. I know it's a bit petty, but I was really bothered by how it looked right out of the box. I needed to fix that. So that from there, that's where the Doom themes package started. And I just had to fix the look. That was the first thing that I had to do. If you looked at the my commit history for Doom, I think the very first, or maybe the second commit, is me pushing the theme, my own little theme, trying to make it look like I think Atom was my first. I liked Atom's look, so I tried to make it look like Atom.
To replicate that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But really, it never occurred to me that anybody would look at my config, much less use it. I never posted about it. I never advertised it. But then suddenly a wild user base appears. I was really surprised by that. It still blows my mind, but they are there. They exist.
I remember that it was in 2018. I've seen your tweet, and you were like celebrating 1,000 stars on GitHub. And 2 years later, or maybe 2.5, we are at almost, not almost, over 10,000 stars. So it's growing faster and faster, I would say.
Yes, it is faster than I can keep up. I need help. I need help with this.
So
SOS.
that was sorry.
Sorry, go on.
That was one of the things I really liked about the community as well, because I was very again blown away by your responsiveness and the fact that you were so close to the community, in the sense that you were responding to a lot of questions, and it's something I haven't seen in other communities, and I was wondering, where do you find energy for that?
Well, blood sacrifice. My bro Cthulhu, he's the original 10x dev. He'll hook you right up. No, I just allocate an hour or two a day to bike shedding. Oh, make that 3 or 4. Quarantine has obliterated my social life. I know it's a meme that bike shedding is a waste of time, but I genuinely think there is value in dedicating time to your tools. More so when you're a DevOps consultant. You never know when those tools will be in your client's hands, and sometimes you put it there. It also helps that all my friends, my family, and my clients are on Discord. So Discord's hooked up to my phone, and whenever I'm commuting or taking a break, I can drop in to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for me because I'm always connected to it.
Just a thought. Do you think there will be a plugin for Discord for Emacs? Maybe like a package with Doom?
I don't think so. Not because I don't want one, but because, well, the Discord devs don't really like you using third-party clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I suppose you could through IRC and Biddleby, I think. But I really don't know how much they enforce that. Will they ban you for that? I don't know. But it's more likely we'll have a Discourse plugin than a Discord one.
I see. Because I was analyzing your config a lot, and I've seen that you are using Emacs for a lot of things.
Yes.
For example, emails are a big part of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I was wondering, I used to, but not anymore. I want to get back into it. I just haven't gotten time to do that.
So I was wondering how far we can, stretch Emacs and
how far we can go. Yeah. Emacs all the things, just EXWM, Emacs all the way down. Yeah, I'm all for that. No, EXWM might be a step too far for me. I don't think Emacs is quite stable enough to be my window manager. But for everything else, yes, please. More Emacs, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was wondering when preparing, I was wondering, because recently, maybe not that recently, but we've seen that there is a lot of Emacs clones or attempts to rewrite Emacs in other languages. So I think the most prominent, one of the most prominent, is Remax, this fork written in Rust.
Yes.
And I was wondering, because when I was asking for questions from the community, many people told me that you are somehow not always fond of Elisp and of Emacs. And I was wondering if you could give your take on that. What do you like about Elisp and Emacs, and what are the things that you would change or maybe improve, and how it relates to those attempts? Those forks that you're trying to push.
Let's see. I do like Emacs Lisp, warts and all, but it is immature as a shell scripting language. You could argue that I'm simply using it for a purpose it wasn't designed for, but I stick to it to avoid imposing more dependencies on users. Frankly, I'd be happy with any other Lisp. In a better world, I think Guile Emacs took off and we'd be using it, But to give an example of an issue I ran up with writing the Doom script, the bin/Doom, when you run Doom upgrade, it pulls the latest version of Doom, then restarts itself. So the rest of the upgrade process can be conducted using the new version of Doom. That restart is necessary because Elisp doesn't give us a trivial or reliable way to unload old source code or reload the new. With all the global state, with all that global state that's in Emacs, I couldn't guarantee things wouldn't cause problems otherwise. And carrying on with the old version may cause its own issues if, say, the new version included a bug fix for the Doom script. So now something I can do in most other languages or Lisps is make system calls, in particular an exec system call to replace the current process with another process. I use this to replace one Doom upgrade with the next Doom upgrade process. But there's no trivial way to do this in Elisp. You know what I mean? And simply launching another Doom upgrade subprocess and redirecting its output won't cut it, because Emacs can't reliably detect prompts emitted by the child process. It'll just, if any package asks the user for input, Emacs swallows the prompt and freezes indefinitely and invisibly. You wouldn't know what's going on. It's frozen. Your only option is to abort the process. So no, without an exec equivalent, I had to jury rig this hack that triggers a runner-up shell script after bin doom exits if bin doom returns a particular exit code. I'm working on making this more sophisticated so it'll persist some state between restarts, but this whole thing leaves a bad taste, and it's really brittle in Windows. What isn't brittle in Windows? Besides that, Elisp doesn't have namespaces, and when you write a large project like Doom's CLI, identifiers tend to get really long. Doom cli do this long function name that eats up whole lines in a function, in the body of a function, and makes it look more daunting than it is. And I mean, I love functional programming. I would love to use more FP practices in my Elisp, but Emacs is just such a huge ball of mutable state that it's stupid difficult. So.
And then you have to be pragmatic, right? Because you have to like deliver in a sense that people expect some things, and you have those like sophisticated problems on one hand. On the other
just have to cut the corners sometimes. Yeah,
exactly.
And of course, there's performance, but I mean, I think that's a horse that's been beaten enough. Elisp isn't the fastest language in the world, but it's good enough for our needs at least.
Yeah.
But it could be faster if we were using Guile, for instance. So it'd be a faster language, more mature and backwards compatible with Elisp. I really couldn't ask for better than Guile. I really wish it took off, but I don't think it's on the table anymore, unless someone goes back and just brings it back to life.
And regarding the future of Emacs, like Emacs 28, and then maybe potential other versions, what would you like to see, and what would like improve it from your standpoint?
If you let me simplify the problem, I think Emacs's biggest issues are its runtime performance and its adoption, a mind share. There aren't enough people to throw at its problems. But runtime performance is something that new users fresh off the boat from other editors run into all the time, and they tell me about it, and I don't know how to help them because these problems, they have different causes, and sometimes it was something that works perfectly great for one person doesn't work at all for the next. If there was something that Emacs could do better, I mean, I could easily just give you an umbrella answer and say performance, but something more substantial. I'm trying to think of something more substantial than that.
Because I was wondering if you look at the commits, for example, as they develop Emacs, from your like perspective, is it the direction you would take, or?
There are some interesting developments in the Emacs community. Native compilation, cooperative threads, and dynamic modules, LSP mode, tree sitter. There is clearly an interest in performance in Emacs, which gives me hope. And I don't mean any hate to Andrea, the guy who developed native compilation, the native compilation branch, but I feel like it's a band-aid over a real problem that could be addressed by, I don't know, I really like the idea of introducing a second language secondary language support into Emacs like NeoVim did with Lua. I'm not a fan of Lua at all, but I am even less of a fan of VimScript. But I think a second language like Guile would have been a fantastic choice. But is it? I don't think it'll go there. I think that ship has long sailed. There is Remax with Rust, which I don't know where that will go. I don't have any skin in that game. I don't know where they plan to go with that. They haven't reached. They were going to re-implement most of the C code base with Rust, and they haven't finished that yet. So I don't know where they're going to go from there. And then there's something like Emacs NG, which is trying to introduce V8 into Emacs, which I don't want to get into how terrified I am about a JavaScript-powered Emacs. But JavaScript has a huge following, just the kind of mind share Emacs might need. I hate myself for even suggesting that. I don't know. It has a bigger chance of success just because of its association with JavaScript.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that. It reminds me of, because VS Code is so popular, and I think one of the reasons, maybe one of the most popular reasons, is that it's so easy to write those plugins, and with Elisp, I think it's like this additional overhead, and even if eventually.
Do you mean it's easier to write in NeoVim?
In VS Code, in TypeScript, for example, like there is this, like as you said, this JavaScript brings a lot of people, and like having this everything written in JavaScript. So it's interesting.
This take might be biased by someone who is comfortable with Elisp, but I think writing packages in Elisp is the easiest thing in the world. I think Emacs Lisp is one of the easiest languages to learn. It's such a simple language. It has none of the bells and whistles of other Lisps.
Yeah.
There's so little to learn about it. So when you say that it might be easier to write it in JavaScript, I don't quite agree with that, because, sorry, you're going to say something?
Yeah, so I was wondering, because there is, maybe that was not phrased correctly, but some people, for example, are attracted to JavaScript because it's something that older people use, and it's easier, maybe not on a technical sense, but people are maybe attracted to something which is more popular, in a sense that they could find answers more easily, or these sorts of things. And I'm not
sure there are more people that know JavaScript than Elisp, certainly.
Yeah. But I'm not sure about that. That's that's something I'm observing, and I'm not really because as you say, there's a lot of languages that are very easy, but for some reason people don't want to use them, and and it's difficult to convince them, or just to say, it's easy. You could use that, but
it would be harder to convince people to use Guile than JavaScript, at least, just because there are just so many JavaScript developers. And it might be harder than Emacs Lisp. It would certainly be harder than Emacs Lisp to learn Guile, but you would have a choice, at least.
And the thing you mentioned, because I wasn't aware of that, it reminds me of NeoVim, and I'm not sure what's your take on NeoVim, but some people from the community suggested I should ask you about Fennel, this Lisp. I'm not sure if you know it, but it's there is like Lisp.
I'm actually a big fan of Fennel. I already use it for prototyping games in Love 2D. It's a great little game engine for Lua. But I'm afraid it's not enough to get me to go to Vim, because Fennel doesn't quite have what I want in a configuration language.
Okay, and interesting.
If I had to narrow it down to one thing, it would be advice. Elisp, all Lisps, well, most Lisps have an aspect-oriented programming library, and in Elisp it's called advice. It lets you safely augment existing functions in a variety of ways, from outright redefining them to attaching arbitrary logic to them. Or you can pre-process its arguments or post-process its return value, all that without touching the source code where it's defined. And when you're up against this monolithic code base that is your editor and all the plugins you have installed, being able to remotely modify code is priceless for a hacker, for exploratory programming. You can come up with solutions so much quicker. You don't have to fork anything. You don't have to worry about how do I explain it? How do I put it? A config enthusiast is an explorer, and their editor is this Jenga tower. And you need some safe way to replace the blocks in that tower, or at least a safe way to do so from a distance. And advice kind of helps you to do that. There is a Lua extension called Aspect Lua that could bring advice to NeoVim, but it still couldn't advise anything trivially that's not written in Lua.
I see.
The majority of NeoVim and its plugins are not written in Lua. They're written in VimScript. So unless NeoVim takes their Lua all the way, then Fennel would just be a very, very small step in that direction, you know?
Because I have no experience in Lua, but I was just reading about that. And Lua is considered to be like a very low-level language in the sense that you can, from what I read, you can easily like mold it to your liking. You know, I was just wondering.
That's certainly true. Yeah, and there are many languages. There are many languages that compile into Lua that you could use if you don't like Lua itself. And I'm not a big fan of Lua. I'm just, well, like I said, less of a fan of VimScript.
Yeah. But as a target, do you find it interesting, like Lua as a target?
Yes, I do. I think it's well. First of all, I think it's a fantastic decision. But on the other hand, I also hate VimScript so much that they could have picked, I don't know, Brainfuck, and I would have been happy. Okay, maybe not Brainfuck, but it's on that level of, God, I hate VimScript. Anything but VimScript. But Lua is a very good choice. It's very fast. With Lua JIT, it's very fast. I can't fault that decision. And I could use Fennel if it really bothers me. So yes, it's a fantastic decision. I really wish Emacs would do something similar, introduce Guile, but no, it doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Interesting. And regarding getting back to Doom, what's your like a plan for, let's say, next? Some people wanted me to ask you for next 5 years, but I think that's too long. I was just more thinking about maybe next 3 months or maybe by the end of the year. How do you envision like the development of Doom, and are there any things on your roadmap that you would like to achieve?
Yes, there are some very big things on the roadmap for the next few months. In fact, I took off this month to focus solely on Doom and finish and resolve some of its technical debt. But let's say 5 years later, I'll have resolved most of Doom's technical debt. It won't take 5 years. It'll probably take less than a year. But I want to pull Doom out of develop branch limbo and polish its contribution literature enough that I can involve more people in its development, because there are a lot of willing people, a lot of really helpful, great people submitting PRs very frequently. And I feel like it's very undirected, and I can't help them very much, or there's a limit to how much I can help them because there's no documentation on the process. But Doom has become bigger than I can handle. I can just barely keep up because quarantine ate my front door. But that won't be forever. in like 2 years, I'm hoping that the discourse will be the center of our, maybe not two, say one, discourse will be the center of our community. So it'll be a centralized hub for curated resources like guides and tutorials, but also it would replace GitHub as our issue tracker and give people a place to talk shop. The larger Doom gets, the more I realize Discord isn't a great archive for questions and answers. Folks on the outside can't search it. Folks inside struggle to search it. I expect Discourse to solve that problem.
So we could say that
so the next few months will be dedicated to setting up the discourse, resolving all that technical debt by rewriting the command line interface, and setting up CI tests, infrastructure, better infrastructure for CI, and just automating more, so I have less work, so I can focus on improving Doom rather than gets trapped in this cycle of damage control and triage. Yeah.
So I would say that if people who are new to Emacs Doom would like to help out, like writing docs would be the first thing they could do, in your opinion? Like
now, since there's no contributor documentation, it's really hard to list all the things that I need done without writing a book on it for each subject. But right now, the biggest the place where I need the most help is just triage and bug reports and writing documentation. Because I spend the majority of my free time helping people out on Discord or going through the issue tracker. The past week, I've been trying really hard to have net zero issues, new issues, just burning through them while I finish up the Discord server. So that is the place where I need the most help at the moment. And then once I'm done with the Discord server, there will be literature that tells you exactly where you can find tasks to help me with, open issues, or places that I don't have any expertise in, like certain language modules that I don't use. But until that's up, I can only say documentation and the issue tracker.
Roger. I just wanted to use this occasion to thank you again. I mean, on behalf maybe of the whole community, because I will repeat that what I said at the beginning, but your energy is like boundless, and it's inspiring. You're responding so quick sometimes, and and when I follow certain discussions, because there is this problem that sometimes it's difficult to replicate things, right? And and we have to have those environments set up. And on top of that, what's any new features or things you let's say in the R&D space for Doom, things you would like to, maybe nice to have, or this kind of stuff?
Let's see. I can think of a million things, but they're all small and they add up. Let's see.
Because, for example, I was very happy to see you at some point you migrated from those old ways of installing to this new way using the straight package. And from my perspective, as someone who's not really that into Emacs, was very nice change. And I was wondering if there was a lot of work to migrate, to do this migration and
to straight.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of work because the package manager that's included with Emacs is very different to straight. It has very different opinions on how your packages are managed. It's rolling release, so you either get the latest version or you don't get any version at all, which kind of sucks when the latest version has a breaking change in it. And there is no MX rollback command. You know what I mean? You have to set up your own backup workflow, or clone the package somewhere and then source it yourself, and there are all these extra steps that you don't have to care about when you're using straight. Because if you don't like what they did, you just pin to an earlier commit. You change to a fork. You know what I mean? You have a lot of options. And what I realized quickly after switching to straight is that straight can produce a whole slew of different kinds of errors. And now I have to catch them all. And there are a lot of them, and I haven't caught them all. And even after my rewrite, I still haven't caught them all, although I handled most of them very well at that point. But there's a whole class of errors that I can't do anything about, like network errors, for instance. It's probably one of the most common issues I get in Doom's issue tracker is Git refused to download this repo, and all I can say is, sorry, you just got to try again. That's a networking issue. But catching all these errors has been its own little endeavor in switching to straight, and it continues to be in this rewrite that I'm working on right now.
So when you see the future of Doom, are there any other such elements that would require a bigger migration, or something that you would like to see in the future that would maybe need to be changed in a substantial way, and how Doom is structured?
Well, I mean, there are some modules that are overdue a rewrite, like our format module or our workspaces module. And the workspaces module is its own beast, and the plugin that it uses is a bit of a nightmare to work with because a lot of it is undocumented, and I really want to replace it with something else that's a bit more well documented, and that's a huge undertaking. But I need to do that. I really do, because there are lots of bugs in there that I need to just stop dealing with. They exhaust me a bit. But if there was a big thing that needed to be changed, I am working on a rewrite of the command line interface. That is by itself a huge project, because it provides infrastructure for our future testing system that will tell me if I bump a package, does it break everything? And that's kind of important information. And I need a system to do that and test for that reliably.
And is it something that you... Sorry,
go ahead.
Is it something that you would like to focus on yourself, or is it something that you would need help with? Or, I mean, is there, can people help with that? I mean,
unfortunately, this is something that I have to do myself, because in order for us to have all these nice things like tests, in order to have collaborators, we need to automate all these annoying things like testing and automated bumping of packages and testing those packages. And in order for all that to happen, we need a rewritten CLI. And I wouldn't put the burden of understanding the black box that is Doom's CLI on anyone but myself. So it would take too long to orient yourself to it, and I'm going to rewrite it all. So why take that time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is something I have to do myself, unfortunately.
I was thinking that maybe we could do a short, a break, maybe not a break, but there's a lot of comments in the comments section. And maybe we could bring some people in.
Sure.
And I've seen that there was a comment from a friend, but I couldn't find it. Let me just see.
Well, Mary Mello asks, doesn't straight have lock files? And yes, it does. And Doom does take advantage of that. But I also have in your package statement, you can directly specify a commit directly. So you can use Straight's log files if you want, or you can use Doom's pin.
Henrik, I was wondering if you see the chat as the same way as I see. Can you click on this question to feature it on the screen, or it's just me?
Oh, can I do that? Doesn't seem like I can now.
Okay. I've seen this question. Question or like maybe passing comment. Effect managers are another way to implement aspect-oriented programming in some ways. Related to our discussion about.
Yeah. You could do that. I'm trying to think of how that would play out with the Vim script implemented side of things, right? I mean, it would still require a similar amount of work across the board to implement effect managers in I don't know how to explain it. At least with advice, you can target any arbitrary function, but with effect manager, there's still someone out there that decides which effects you want users to be able to change, or apply effect or apply logic to. You know what I mean? I guess what I'm saying is the advantage of advice is that no one can tell you what you can and can't advise. So there is power in that I adore about Elisp, any Lisp with an advice library.
There is another question from this font is very small, but Willie, how much of Doom is under unit tests?
Ooh, if I'm being very generous, 7%. I mean, post rewrite, it's more like 14%, but it's still abysmal, absolutely abysmal. But that is something I'm going to improve over time, and we need that rewrite to happen before I can.
I wanted also to ask you about something like maybe controversial topic, but how do you see how do you like Spacemacs, and how do you compare and maybe contrast those two tools? I mean, Doom and Spacemacs.
When I first started, I wasn't aware of Spacemacs. I think there are some people who think that Doom is a fork of Spacemacs, but I didn't even know it existed. If I had, maybe I at the time I thought, hey, Emacs has a steep learning curve. What better way to learn it than to write a config from scratch? So even if I knew Spacemacs existed, I probably would have still ended up writing Doom. Yeah. So I mean, my motive was simple curiosity. I can't compare Doom and Spacemacs because I've never used Spacemacs at length, or any other framework really. Most of what I know about it is secondhand. I drew some inspiration from Prelude, its file structure before Doom introduced modules, and some ideas have crept over from ex-Spacemacs users, like space as a leader key. I thought that made perfect sense, so why not? But outside of bug reports where it's brought up, I'm largely ignorant of Spacemacs. So I really couldn't comment on it.
For me, when I first discovered Doom, I really like this minimalism. You know, not sure how to explain that, but it was very like Emacs, like default config, and this layer that Doom provides it feels very thin. Like and in the case of Spacemacs, for me it was something like a new abstraction. But I don't want to like say it's a bad thing. I think it may be it's different for different people, and
I think that level of abstraction can be very useful to people, especially people who don't really want to touch Emacs Lisp. They just want an editor that works. So I can't blame that. I wrote Doom for my own selfish purposes, and I wanted it to be fast. People tell me that Spacemacs is slow, and I don't know how true that is. I remember someone. I think it was the Spacemacs Twitter account that posted like a 0.7 second startup time, and I was like, oh, it seems pretty fast. But then I get reports from other people telling me that they have 15-second startup times, and I don't know. It's hard to know without trying Spacemacs myself.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll do that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And there are lots of times where people say, "Hey, Henrik, X and Y doesn't work, but it worked fine in Spacemacs. How does that work?" And I end up having to dig through Spacemacs's
and see what they have
code base to see how it works, and that frustrates me a bit because I don't know. Sometimes all they give me is a keybind, and chasing a keybind through someone else's code base that isn't your active Emacs config is a bit difficult.
Tedious. Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, that is my primary exposure to Spacemacs.
I had another question about maybe the things that you often see in the community, in Doom community, that are misunderstood about Doom. Like, for example, people don't use certain things the way they are supposed to be used, or like the errors or problems that repeat. Are there any things like that?
There are quite a lot. Doom has kind of unwittingly become a funnel for all of Emacs's issues and plugins issues. Something breaks upstream, it's reported to Doom. You know what I mean? So I get from some of the hate mail I've gotten, I get the impression that people think this is Doom's fault all the time, every time.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I don't deny that some of them are certainly my fault, but I think it's blown out of proportion among people who don't particularly like me. Besides that, well, what else? Major misconceptions. I suppose the biggest misconception is people come into Emacs, to Doom, thinking that Doom uses the package manager that's built into Emacs. So they copy. If you look at the documentation of any package, it'll usually tell you how to install it as if you're using vanilla Emacs.
Yes.
And if you're using vanilla Emacs, you're using the package manager that's included with Emacs. And when you drop that into Doom and it doesn't work, that shocks people. Doom can work with that package manager if you initialize it yourself. But there really is no point to do that in doing that because it has a package manager you can use. And just that's the most frequent thing that comes up for new users is that this doesn't work. Package EL isn't behaving like I expect it to. This instructions doesn't work. What's wrong with Doom? So I guess that could do with better documentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, I remember it was quite, long after I got introduced to Doom, I discovered those, maybe it's stupid of me, but Space H, like the whole suite of those commands that allows for the introspections. And I'm not sure if many people know about that. I didn't know about that. And I was very happy to discover that I could, introspect everything from variables to functions to modules. And even those the Doom modules,
the biggest positive for Emacs, hands down, that addresses all its negatives is that you probably hear that it's self-documenting, which primarily means documentation is a first-class citizen in Elisp. You can easily look it up for any variable, function, macro, face, whatever. Even something that isn't defined in Elisp, that's defined in the C code, you can look it up. And all the commands on the C on Control H, you'll find a ton of commands for asking Emacs all sorts of questions. What command is bound to this key? What does this function do? Where is it defined? What is the value of this variable? It is great. And if you use Emacs, you're living in a REPL. You have direct, unfettered access to its guts. And if you want to know anything about the current state of Emacs, you can just ask it directly. That's That's something I don't think any other editor can do quite at that level.
Yeah.
You can throw arbitrary elisp at Emacs and change whatever you want and see the effect immediately. And not only is documentation for any symbol or one keystroke or three away, so is its definition. You can just documentation can be out of date, it can be inaccurate, it can be wrong, but the code doesn't lie. You just press GD for evil users, and it takes you straight to the definition, and you can see how it works right there in front of you.
Yeah,
I don't think you can pull that off in any other editor without some complex C tags generated or an Elisp server indexing the source code at the time. I'm not sure. I've never seen it before, but it is something that really stands out to me for Emacs. So, I mean, if you're new to Emacs, Control H, there is a bunch of commands on there you should definitely check out. And if you're using Doom, it's on Space H. So, great place to start if you're new to it.
There is, maybe to change a little bit the subject, there is a question about your other programming languages you enjoy using.
That I enjoy using. I use a lot of Fennel just because I can. I love the Love2D engine, so I'm using it a lot. But if I had to pick, I'm writing a lot of Rust these days for my work, and because I want to see if it's a comfortable language to write games in. And there are some great libraries for making games in Rust, but I don't know. All the amount of juggling you have to do with borrowing is it's a mental hurdle that I just haven't gotten used to yet, and I think I've had a better experience with Crystal, which is basically Ruby at the speed of C.
Yeah.
So it's a close tie between Ruby and maybe which Lisp do I like the most?
Interesting. And for example, something like Go, have you had a chance to try it out and maybe?
Go, I've been a bit allergic to, just because it seems like it's a nice average of many languages, and but doesn't feel as expressive as any of them. It's very rigid, kind of like how Python is, in a sense that you can't be too clever. But no, Go doesn't interest me very much. Not as much as, say, Common Lisp does, or Crystal.
Absolutely. So just from top of my head, I was just thinking, if you if you work with Rust, there is this, I think, Lisp called Carp. And it's, I'm not sure if you heard about that, but it's just something that maybe someone on the comments could find a link. But yeah,
I've heard of it, and I've only looked into it very shallowly, not very deeply. I like the idea, but I really don't have much else to say about it. I haven't tried it myself yet.
It seems that Lisp are like getting back somehow. Like the course, I mean, of Lisp is maybe over. Like so many Lisp implementations for those different programming languages. Not sure if you agree, but
that Lisp is over.
The course of Lisp, the fact that it's it's getting more mainstream somehow.
I could see it never entering the mainstream, which is kind of sad, but it is what it is, I guess. I try very hard to incorporate Lisp into everything I do, to a fault. Into my window manager, I'm trying so hard to get into Stump WM, but you really have to reinvent the wheel for that. I don't know. I really want to make game development in Lisp a thing. just Common Lisp is a pretty decent language for making games if you can tame the garbage collector. But I don't know. It does feel like I'm forcing a square peg into a round hole. But I want to see Lisp survive, and I would like to see it in the mainstream, but I don't hold out too much hope for that.
Yeah, it's we'll see.
In web development, I suppose it does have more of a presence. It has more promise. Trouble is, I don't do as much web development these days as I used to. So that's where I started.
You mentioned that you are doing right now. You work with in Rust, and could you share a little bit like the scope of your work outside of Doom?
Let's see.
If that's not the too, personal question.
Well, there are some NDAs involved, so I am limited in how much I can say, but
no worries.
Let's see. Well, recently I was working on there's a company where I work for as an independent consultant. They're writing a machine learning assisted conductor for video games. Basically, a video game that will take samples of many orchestral pieces and assemble them depending on the context in the game. Like they will add layers or change the play rate depending on how much health you have, for instance. And they're trying to do something very experimental with that. And they hired me to write a proof of concept in Rust. So that's where most of my Rust time goes these days. But what can I say about it?
So we are approaching like 1 hour, and I was thinking if there are any more questions from the community, and if not, I'm not sure if this will work, but I was thinking maybe I will open Doom, and Henrik, if you could like teach me some things. I didn't know. What do you think? Do you think this will work, or some like things that maybe are interesting to know, or
so tricks, right?
Something that
I've already mentioned advice. I think you've already covered Snipe and AV and Evil multi-edit in Doomcasts.
If there are not any, so don't worry. I mean, it's a very broad question, so maybe that's maybe I should ask something more specific. But I was just wondering if maybe there was something you recently stumbled upon.
Well, how about this? I'll think about that for a while, and let's answer some common questions in the meantime.
Perfect. So let's see what we have here. So one person suggests a trick to restart.
SQR,
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it will quit Emacs and try to restart and restore your previous session. Yeah, that's a nice trick. It should work whether or not you have the workspaces module enabled. That needs testing.
There is an interesting question, but feel free to, disregard. Does your work on Doom provide you significant income?
Right now, the donations for Doom pay for half of my living expenses. So yes, and it's not enough to live off on, but it's enough that I have been able to set aside months in a year to dedicate to Doom. And March, this month is supposed to be my first month doing a Doom sprint. So I can set aside at least 2 months in a year to dedicate to Doom. So it's not enough to live off of, but it's enough to buy a lot of hours for Doom. So that answers your question, I hope.
So maybe we could use this occasion to, mention that to support you, you can go to GitHub sponsors, right? Or
there people have been asking me to set up a GitHub sponsors, and I've been a bit I've been procrastinating on it. I will get around to that, and it will be available through GitHub. Yeah, that will be the ideal place, because I hear that LiberaPay has issues, give some people issues, and it's also anonymous, so I can't thank you if I don't know who you are. And I do want to I just have to come up with some good benefits for the tiers, because I would like to take this more seriously. I would like to spend more hours doing Doom and giving back to the community. Right now, I haven't made any promises like that, and I would like to.
So there is a nice comment from, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but don't forget to support Henrik, and I totally agree with that. So Henrik, your work is fantastic. And
thank you, I appreciate that.
So I think we have an hour on the clock, and I think it would be a good point and good moment to stop the stream. Is there any a last message for you, Henrik, to share with the community, or something maybe I haven't asked about and you would like to maybe clarify? Or
No, I can't think of anything clever to say. Thank you for using Doom. I don't know where all of you came from, but holy crap, it's been a blast to work on Doom. Thank you. It's because of all of you. Thank you so much.
Doom to the moon, we could say.
Doom to the moon. Yes.
So Henrik, once again, thank you very much for your time for this interview, and especially for your work on Doom. And it changed my life, and I think it changed lives of other people as well.
Certainly changed mine. Thank you.
So hopefully the donations will surpass living expenses. At some point, it would be yeah. So once again, if you use Doom, I encourage everyone to support Henrik's work. Henrik, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for the nice chat and for all the questions. And yeah, that'll be all.
All right. Thanks.